Welcome to Federal Insights for July, discussing the future of work, sponsored by Verizon.
Welcome and thanks for joining us. My guests today are Cornelius Brown, the Director for Department of Defense Sales at Verizon, and Brian Schramsky, the Managing Partner for 5G at Public Sector at Verizon. So Cornelius, I'll start with you. We're talking about smart base futures and what that means for the United States. Give us an idea of what a smart base looks like and what it is.
Yeah. Well, in essence, a smart base of the future is the integration of connected technologies that will fundamentally improve the performance and efficiency of assets and services across a military installation. And as we define smart bases, we can essentially view them as mini cities in itself, where infrastructure, building, transportation, energy management are all factors of a city and a base. And what drives a smart base is that they're all hyper-connected. It's an ecosystem where everything becomes connected.
So this is something that you might have like a smart grid that brings everything together, that you're looking at the cybersecurity of something, you're looking at the physical security, all those sorts of things as well.
Absolutely. Security, it will be a fabric of how we architect smart bases. You also have things like sensors, cameras, vehicles. It's all working to become fully integrated. And it really allows the operators to have more control and make more informed decisions, which is really important.
So 5G is something that Verizon has been working on, obviously, and has partnered with the Defense Department on this. And Brian, what does 5G just mean to begin with? All of us have cell phones, but I'm not sure that we're exactly familiar with the networks that actually run them.
Sure. Great question, Scott. And I think we welcome that opportunity because I think 5G means a lot of different things to many different people, and we want to level set, right? And first and foremost, the 4G network is going to be the backbone for 5G network, right? So as we deployed our 4G network, which is going on 11 years, can't imagine that already. We've made a lot of enhancements. So if you had a device or our first generation smartphone in 2010 and what it looks like in 2021, it's vastly different. And obviously with our 5G nationwide and our 5G millimeter wave, we're now operating on low and mid-band spectrum on 5G. We're very excited. And it gives the ability for military installation and military personnel to use various networks depending on the use case. So as Cornelius mentioned, we're going to see some use cases around energy that will use 5G nationwide or in 4G in some cases, depending on the sensor. And then we'll see on the 5G millimeter wave and the ultra wideband as we get to next generation technologies where we want to do AR and VR, right? We want to control drones. We want to do better and more video, right? That's where you'll see the 5G nationwide and also the 5G millimeter wave really taking hold. And one of our test cases that we have right now is Miramar, right there in California, where they're actually using both 4G and 5G technology. And I think what we're also seeing is the ecosystem of 5G devices are only going to get better, right? I think we're limited in some cases. It's only smartphones, but you'll see, as Cornelius mentioned, some of those 5G IoT devices coming online later in 21, and you'll see gangbusters in 2022.
Yeah, can you give us an idea a little bit about how us as consumers might see 5G versus 4G? Because, this is something that it's hard to realize in the abstract until we actually see it, right? We hear that everything's going to be connected to the internet. So how might we see it as regular customers? And then how might people see this in the Defense Department in ways that things can get connected that may not be connected now?
Sure. So from a end user, it could be a military personnel or a loved one or a family member, right? So you can imagine you'll see 5G devices. So think about the newer iPhones, Samsung devices. Most recently with Apple and their new iPad all have 5G enabled into it. So from a consumer or day-to-day use cases, you'll see that. Very soon you'll see from more traditional like Cisco, Cradlepoint, Sierra Wireless, those IoT will actually have 5G connectivity in there. And what we're starting to see is also new avenues for us, right? Something that's going to be near and dear to our heart is we're going to use 5G to deliver broadband access, right? So something that you see today in certain markets around 5G homes. So we're outside of the traditional 13 colonies or the FiOS markets, if you will. We'll deliver broadband access through 5G, what we call business internet. So from the DoD standpoint, we see use cases where we will actually provide broadband access via 5G. So one of the things we get very excited about is the distribution model for 5G is going to be multi-pronged, right? You'll have 5G mobility, as I just mentioned, and you'll have something called 5G business internet where you're actually delivering broadband access.
Cornelius, we'll turn to you. We're looking into getting smart bases now. There are some that have been created within the Defense Department at this point on an experimental level. What are some of the challenges that a base has from becoming a regular base into a smart base?
Yeah, great question, Scott. When I think about some of the challenges a base may face in becoming a smart base, I'd probably start with three things. The first one being security. For military bases, security cannot be an afterthought, and it has to be factored into the foundation of a smart base architecture and design. Second, I would say budget. The prospect of an large initial cost can be a little scary for organizations. And represent another hurdle for them to adopt smart base technology. And then lastly, deployment and implementation is going to be critical. We often talk about how do we shift from PowerPoint to proof of concept and then into production, and careful planning and prioritization will be key to establishing that foundation. Brian talked about the use cases associated, and then we would need to really focus on return on investments, that would allow the operators to continue to scale into a phased approach, because something like a smart base doesn't happen overnight.
And we've seen, like I said, we've seen this happen on some military bases. What sort of things are they doing on these bases at this point? They were pretty big multi-million-dollar contracts with Verizon to really set these up. And so we see service members with different styles of life now, and we see different weapon systems and other things like that getting online with 5G technology. Can you just maybe explain a little bit about how these experimental and test beds are working?
Yeah, so going back to the effort at Miramar, which was one of the first 5G millimeter wave instances deployed on a military base, we're really taking a private public approach. So there's a large collaboration with multiple industry players to really enable various use cases around energy management, drone management, autonomous vehicles, and it's really a collaborative effort to really prove out what does the customer want to accomplish. What's the desired outcome, and how do we prove that the solution will work, and what does the technology yield? It's really important to think through the different factors of 5G. I think Brian discussed it very well, that we have millimeter wave, we have this the C-band technology, and then we also have LTE that exists today. So depending on the use cases, we have the technology that will fit the needs of our customers best.
And so you could just move between each one of those if you need to. So if you need something with a lower band, you just go ahead and use that and don't go to anything higher, right?
That's right. And we often talk about interoperability, and a lot of our handsets, as an example, are built with software that allows dynamic spectrum sharing. So depending on the bandwidth that's required, you can seamlessly go between the different technologies to build a connection and maintain a connection.
So one of the things the Defense Department's really trying to work on is integrating artificial intelligence, machine learning within not only 5G, but within everything it does. It's supposed to be like electricity, basically. You don't really think about it, it's just there. How is artificial intelligence and those sorts of things being integrated in with 5G at this point?
Yeah. So, devices are continuing to become smarter, which means that they're going to generate larger amounts of data. They're going to be capable of delivering more services. When you pair that with, mobile edge computing, MEC, now you have the ability to process information closer to the end user or the application via the cloud. And this really removes a lot of historical latency that prevented us from, applications being able to make near real-time decisions. And I think autonomous vehicles are a great example of that capability, where now they can process their environment, such as red lights, people crossing streets, they can avoid accidents, and in some cases, they can even drive themselves with level 4 and level 5 autonomous capabilities that did not exist before mobile edge computing. Paired with 5G, artificial intelligence and machine learning will help users process terabytes of information, make data-driven decisions, while providing actionable insights that they can take action on, like predictive maintenance, enhanced safety, and even threat detection will all be benefits of 5G paired with artificial intelligence and machine learning.
And you were talking about, autonomous vehicles and things like that. Those are already being used in some ways, or being looked into being used on some of the experimental bases. I shouldn't say experimental bases, the test bases. So how can they bring in the data? How is 5G helping with those sorts of technologies? And what are those vehicles doing?
Yeah, so In these autonomous vehicles or drones, when they're going out and doing various testing, they're surveying the environment, they're collecting massive amounts of data. And what we see, at Miramar as an example, is these units can come in at the end of the day, they can dock into a station, and 5G allows them to do massive data dumps of 100 gigs of data at a time. So therefore, researchers can then go take that data and analyze it. So that's just one example of what 5G will make possible in regards to connectivity to connected things.
And what might we see when it comes to just being an individual once you're on the base? You're going to see drones flying around, maybe a autonomous vehicle driving by. What can you do with your phone? Maybe watch a movie, something like that. Are things going to be a little different than they are now?
Yeah, the visual often reminds me of the Jetsons, right? So I would expect to see, drones potentially delivering packages, shuttles with no human driver, going around the campus. But yeah, it'll be a different way of life that will make things, more effective, more efficient, and more seamless for sure.
Brian, on the IT side, or maybe behind the scenes types of sides, what are the IT people going to be seeing in analysts? Are they going to be able to look at data better? Are they going to be able to take in information that maybe would help them make the base more secure, that sort of thing?
Yeah, I think from an IT administrator or security analyst, right? I think 5G, as well as just mobility in general, gives you a better opportunity to actually see down to the end device, right? Every device is going to be connected. So you can put in vectors like GPS, right? This device should only be responding for this particular location. It shouldn't be on the other side of the base. To get real-time data, you can actually have a control plane to see who's authorized on my network, who's not supposed to be on my network, right? So a lot more transparency, which is really cool. Now it opens up that threat vector, right? Because you're going to have more devices connected. So that's where you see security layers being put on top. Hear terms around software-defined perimeter, or zero trust architecture, where you want these devices. I mean, going back to Cornelius's point, I look at autonomous vehicles squared, right? We have one scenario on the base where we have a unmanned vehicle, autonomous vehicle, actually having autonomous drones on there. So you have an autonomous shuttle moving drones that are autonomous as well, right? So taking it one step further, we're not just having autonomous, a shuttle or a drone. You're actually combining that, and all of that is working with no human intervention, right? The drone's going to go right back. And if they're running out of battery, the shuttle actually goes to them rather than somebody, it's reading the data from the actual drone. So it's those kind of interactions that you'll see when everything is connected. You take it to one level higher, which is really exciting.
We're going to take a quick break. My guests today are Cornelius Brown, the Director for the Department of Defense Sales at Verizon, and Brian Schwamsky, the Managing Partner for 5G Public Sector at Verizon. I'm your moderator, Scott Massioni, on Federal Insights, a discussion on the smart base of the future, sponsored by Verizon on Federal News Network.
For 15 years, the federal community of government managers, executives, appointees, and contractors has started its day with me, Tom Temin, host of the Federal Drive, our daily program of the latest headlines and interviews with people behind the news. Your go-to source for information about everything from IT to pay and benefits. Be informed, stay informed. Start your morning with me, Tom Temin, on the Federal Drive. Listen on air on the Federal News Network app and on Spotify.
Welcome back to Federal Insights, a discussion on smart base of the future, sponsored by Verizon on Federal News Network. My guests today are Cornelius Brown, the Director for the Department of Defense Sales at Verizon, and Brian Schwamsky, the Managing Partner for 5G Public Sector at Verizon. I'm your moderator, Scott Massioni. So, Brian, we left off talking about encryption, zero trust, cybersecurity, all those sorts of things. 5G, in some ways, is a double-edged sword. It leaves you open to more surface area for attack, but also gives you faster faster response times and things like that. Maybe tell us a little bit about some of the challenges that 5G might bring, and then we can go into some of the advantages.
Sure. I mean, there's, by public service announcement here. So as we move to 5G, and we hear this a lot, not only from the DoD, but also Homeland Security and Department of Justice, right? So first and foremost, we'll always be CALIA compliant, right? So that's one of the fears I would say when it comes to 5G. There is a fear of going dark, right? Higher levels of encryption, but rest assured we're CALIA compliant. I think also we're starting to see around 5G and some of the security and threat factors out there is around supply chain, right? In that having a trusted supply chain to ensure that we have a secure network. And I applaud the DoD as well as the State Department, as well as other agencies that are really looking at that and doing that. Obviously at Verizon, what we do here is look at many different things, right? So we work with the 3GPP. We actually do industry outreach. So we work with our partners out there, and I'd say the community, so the other telcos as well. So we work in accordance. It's in our best interest for this great country to actually make sure that we all have a very good security model when it comes to 5G. And then, you can never, rest on your laurels when it comes to security, right? So there's also, better encryption in 5G, mutual authentication, which we adopt as we get into release 15. And there's some new things coming out, release 16, as we get into standalone core in 22 from Verizon, which we're very excited for. The encryption in that slice opens up network slicing, which we're very excited for. And then you take it one step further when you start looking at zero trust architecture. You look at software defined perimeter, where you have security platforms that are overlaying that RAN, radio access network security, and what the carrier is doing and putting on top of it. You have a more comprehensive model that it's very exciting for DoD, right? So they can look at very different, analyst reports, right? It opens up, I would say, I would say a threat vector, but I think one of the things that we're seeing from the pandemic, which I think is really push, I would say, telework and mobility, is I have to conduct my job not inside of four walls, right? There were some policies, there wasn't consistency across, and I think we see this in DoD that saying, hey, for COOP, God forbid, the next pandemic, a cyber attack or a power outage that I can't get in this particular facility, how do I conduct my business, right? How do I conduct military business? And I think where you see on 5G, now that I have the ability to do more things and more operational networks, right? Outside a IT worker, office worker, say in the Pentagon, that more operation along the flight line or in the warehouse or in a test bed or in a theater of war, I think you're now seeing with 5G, I have a network that can do what traditional wireline used to do and what traditional wireless. 5G is really in the middle of those two. At the same time, the threat factors on both sides of that aisle come into play, but having a coordinated security policy is the right approach. But rest assured, the challenge that we want to make sure is we have a valid, secure supply chain, and also working with industry standards. And most importantly, having outreach, working with public sector agencies, federal, state, and local, to make sure that we meet their needs and their challenges when it comes there. Because I think some things open up the mind, right? When we talk about edge compute, as Cornelius mentioned, things like FedRAMP come into play, right? Because we're actually hosting the application at the edge. So the cool thing is with 5G, we can take, cloud security or network security, and actually 5G uses both of those. We just start bringing it in. It's not, I have to design something completely different just for 5G, right? We can leverage some of those best security practices when we talk about 5G and edge compute.
So to create all of this 5G, there has to be obviously a backbone to make sure these things are working and are steady and hardy to make sure the Defense Department can use them for all the information it needs. How are you building that out? How are you making sure that's secure?
Yeah, so one of the things that Verizon remains focused on is delivering our One Fiber project, which happens to be one of the largest infrastructure projects in the US. And that's really helping continue the momentum in scaling 5G because to your point, fiber is a very important element. And last year, we really hit our stride, delivering almost 1,400 route miles of fiber per month.
And Cornelius, I remember not that long ago, the Defense Department was considering possibly banning things like Fitbits because it was giving away locations of where service members were. Obviously, with 5G, there's going to be a lot more connectivity with different devices. One of the things we haven't talked about much is encryption. Encryption is getting more and more complex over time. And then I'm assuming also with having more devices, encryption is going to be more complex. So either Cornelius or Brian, where does that fit in with 5G and maybe even like quantum computing? Because things are going to get a lot longer than we can imagine.
No, that's a great question, Scott. I mean, obviously with 5G, in release 15 and release 16, there's higher levels of encryption with 5G. We're adopting those networks. As I mentioned before, right? There's over the top that you can do, right? If it's software defined perimeter, zero trust architecture, all that kind of stuff, right? But you bring up a good point with the quantum computing, not quantum key distribution, which we do use as well. But that's always a concern, right? How do we make sure that we have a very secure network, not only for the military, but also the tens of millions or hundred millions of customers on a commercial network, right? Not only are we doing work for the DoD, but we have a lot of financial transactions happening on our network, right? So, it's always a concern. It will never go away. And it just keeps us on our toes and make sure that we have a very secure network, and always improving that network, right? And we're looking at other things, right? So another topic that we get a lot of questions about on 5G is O-RAN, right? And we're committed to O-RAN. We're part of the 5G O-RAN Alliance, and we're welcoming new interfaces and possibly new security models that actually come out of O-RAN. So we publicly stated that we're excited about O-RAN, putting development work behind it, and we're looking for the first partner portfolio to actually supply us, and possibly those scenarios when it has advanced security considerations when it comes to O-RAN and actually incorporating into our overall network strategy.
And Cornelius, let's move to the actual future warfighter. 5G has the possibility to make warfighters more lethal, to save lives, to help them stay more connected. Where did these possibilities go? And can you talk maybe a little bit more granularly about how it might help an individual warfighter even?
Yeah. So, two areas I would call out that, we saw accelerated coming out of the pandemic. And the first one was really centered around immersive learning and education, right? So when you think about traditional learning, how that typically will happen in a classroom setting, we saw that shift and we'll continue to see that shift into solutions like augmented reality and digital environments. And we have a number of solutions underway that are being piloted today. Another one we could touch on would be around healthcare, right? Where when you think about virtual doctor visits, remote patient monitoring on wearable devices, and improved patient outcomes, we will continue to see that be increased. And those are both great examples, coming out of a COVID pandemic, that we were able to improve the lives of those on base and improve the capabilities that we're providing to the warfighter.
So, I've heard of different future technologies as well, maybe ones that we haven't even fathomed yet, that might be helpful and maybe able to connect into 5G. We've seen, I've heard of some fabrics that have, connectivity through the internet. You're able to monitor people's vitals and make sure that they're still alive, see when they're anxious or when they're calm and all those sorts of things. Have you heard of any farther future technologies, and, what other applications might there be that we may not have even thought about yet?
Yeah, so within the DoD, the wearables is becoming a segment that is continuing to grow. We've seen solutions like connected rings as an example that are constantly checking, vitals for those that are out in the field. And, one of the things we'll see around telehealth and telemedicine in general is just the massive explosion, because, the ability to detect things ahead of time and be predictive and offer, solutions that, really maintain the warfighter in the field. So that is definitely an area that we're going to see continue.
And Brian, one thing that people maybe sometimes forget is that military families also live on these bases, and they'll be connected to 5G as well. What are some of the just regular things that you might be able to get that might be really excited for you?
Yeah, I mean, we forget about that, right? So we talk about all the next generation technology. So, I mean, from military personnel, right, they're, living on the base, right? They'll be able to take a shuttle or bus, they'll get them around, right? All that cool stuff. But more importantly, just connection. Right. So if they're using video calling, whatever platform that they're using, right, Google, Zoom, FaceTime, right, on these connected devices, they'll just have a much better experience, right? They'll be in high definition video. They'll have faster bit rates, so they can do more videos. They can upload information, all of that good stuff, right? And you couldn't ask for much more, right? To have a very intimate and immersive experience in a personal way, right, where you're connected. It's very exciting. I know I have 2 teenage daughters, and if I want to call them, I had to do a video. Audio, they don't like the audio experience. They want to see you and do it every day. So, imagine for military personnel that, they do the great work to protect this great country, if they can connect in a video, that's awesome. And, that gets me excited, and I'll probably tear up. I'm pretty emotional. I'm like the Dick Vermeil here. So it is really cool stuff to be able to do that and provide that technology.
And I'd assume that that could probably help with future education as well. I mean, people that are in remote areas during the pandemic, there's probably really could have used 5G, but in the future we may have people, anywhere really, and maybe even using 5G up in space at times, right?
Yeah, one of the things that we learned from the pandemic is we had a huge growth engine in terms of distance learning, right? So if we look at K through 12, right, huge learning aspect, right, where people didn't have connectivity, we're able to provide connectivity. I think that's very applicable in the military, right, where we have, if we have isolation, with the pandemic, I can't go in certain barracks, I can only have certain people in there, but I want to be connected so they can have a device and be connected and actually have that training. I think where you're going to take to the next step in some of the use cases, as Cornelius mentioned, is things where I want to do predictive maintenance and I actually want to put on an AR, VR headset and actually, work on a piece of, a tank, a plane, a Navy vessel, right? And I don't necessarily have the expertise, but I'm able to do that. I will tell you near and dear that's right there with the DoD. We actually have a project right now with the VA, the Veterans Administration in Palo Alto, California, where we're actually using 5G to power robotic surgery, right? Where now we can get 3D images, where today, you have static 2D images, right? Where you kind of, left, right side of the brain, top, bottom. Now we can actually have a 3D hologram, and it's leveraging our partners as well as our 5G MEC, as well as our 5G RAN, and actually able to do that, right? So you can actually look around and see up, down, and right rather than looking at static 2D images, right? So be able to power that technology, that will only get better, right? So, I tell this to people all the time, right? When we rolled out LTE and 4G, Uber and Lyft or Airbnb weren't thought of, right? And all of that experience now is done through a mobile device, right? So now that we have that 5G technology, I tell this all the time, this is a 10-year project, right? We're like year 4 in. We started really in 2017. We've got a lot of runway, if you will, use military terms, as Cornelius mentioned. We just got the C-band auction. You'll see that rolling out over the next 3 years into 24. That's 3 years from now. And then all those applications, the ecosystem will only increase as we go the next couple of years, right? So rest assured, this is a marathon, not a sprint. But at the end of the day, customers want connectivity, they want reliability. And that's all we're about. And we can power that infrastructure from military. I think it's a win-win for us and it's a win-win for them.
Going to be a very interesting future for sure. Well, I'd like to thank both my guests today. Cornelius Brown's the Director of Department of Defense Sales at Verizon, and Brian Schwamsky is the Managing Partner for 5G Public Sector at Verizon. I'm your moderator, Scott Massioni, and you're listening to Federal News Network. For more on this discussion, excuse me. You want me just to do that again, Jason?
Sure.
Okay. I'd like to thank my guest today, Cornelius Brown, the Director for I'd like to thank my guest today, Cornelius Brown, the Director for the Department of Defense Sales at Verizon, and Brian Schwamsky, the Managing Partner for 5G Public Sector at Verizon. I'm your moderator, Scott Massioni, and you're listening to Federal News Network. For more on this discussion, visit federalnewsnetwork.com and search Verizon.
Thank you for listening to Federal Insights for July, sponsored by Verizon on Federal News Network.